Good night, good luck. The fitting catchphrase to Techland's open-world zombie action-adventure game. The game was originally released in 2015, but with its sequel announced and under development, I thought it would be a good time to look back at Dying Light to see if it still holds up. The game takes place in the fictional city of Harran, where a virus of sorts has broken out and turned a majority of its residents into zombies. As a result, Harran is under complete lockdown by the military, in an attempt to stop the infection from spreading further. We don't know exactly how everything started, but by this point our main goal is to end it. We follow Kyle Crane, an undercover agent from the GRE, or Global Relief Effort. The job at hand is to recover a file that could lead to a cure for the virus. Unfortunately, it is in the hands of a rogue agent going by the name of Rise, and he's threatened to publicize a version of the file that's incomplete, and thus could do more damage than anything. The game begins with us being airdropped into the city, and of course within moments, all hell breaks loose. Immediately we are injured and bitten by a zombie, making us infected. A few survivors happen to save us, with one of them giving their life to do so. They bring us to the tower, a skyscraper which has become sort of a safe haven for many survivors. Here we are given our tutorial and slowly introduced to the mechanics of the game. The game takes its time to teach us one thing at a time, which could be looked at as time-consuming for a returning player, as you can't skip the tutorial, but it is great for newer players since they will have plenty of time to acclimate to the mechanics. Once let loose, we find ourselves doing some errands for the people of the tower, in an effort to blend in. Unfortunately, a very important supply run goes horribly wrong. There is a sought-after drug in Harran called Antizin, which suppresses the symptoms of the zombie virus for a while, but it isn't permanent. Large supply crates of Antizin are airdropped in regularly, but those drops are often contested. We volunteer to do a separate run for Antizin, and we actually hit the mother lode. But the GRE tells us to burn it instead? The primary goal is to find the file, and burning the package will force an interaction with Rise. However, there's a lot of people depending on this stuff to live. Kyle reluctantly burns it, but this is where I'd like to point out an interesting aspect of Dying Light. It's politics. While we are in a zombie apocalypse, we are still an undercover agent working to recover a stolen file from a rogue undercover agent. We are constantly focusing on our mission and less so on the survival aspect of things. It makes Dying Light stand out from the crowd right off the bat in a sea of other zombie-related titles. After we burn the Antizin, night falls, and we get to see how dangerous Harran really is. There isn't any time to think about what we did, because we need to get the fuck out of here. Here is where we get to see why the tagline of the game is good night and good luck. But I will go into further details on my thoughts about the day-night cycle later on. Surviving the night does bring us to Rise though, our antagonist of the game. The moment we see him, he's shown to be brutal, but he hoards Antizin, so we do need to help him. I have to say, Rise steals the show whenever he's on screen. While a bit generic, he still comes across as he knows something that we don't whenever we see him. He's always claiming it's for chaos, but still is always one step ahead of us. As you might expect, he fucks us over. This leads us to try to steal Antizin from Rise instead, which doesn't go exactly as planned. With Jade Aldemir, one of our original saviors at the start of the game, we go to a local school where we think the Antizin is stored. But rather than Antizin, we find a stockpile of explosives. While not what we wanted, explosives certainly have some use in this crazy city. Jade's brother Rahim is dead set on using them to blow up a hive of infected in an incomplete skyscraper. He says it would make the nights easier to travel and therefore easier to make supply runs. But if anybody is going to do it, it's us, which upsets Rahim. Now Rahim was the first person we really interact with in Harran. He is the one that pushes us in the right direction and gives us our tutorial. When we volunteer to go to Rise, Rahim is very encouraging in the brief moment we see him. Rahim is certainly one of the few friends that we have here, or at least the closest you can have to a friend. That's why it's all the more intense when we find that Rahim took the explosives and ran off to blow the skyscraper himself, and gets injured. He set the timer on the explosives, so we need to move fast. After successfully blowing up the skyscraper, it's revealed that Rahim's injury is actually a bite wound, and he turns. Our first friend in this nightmare of a city, the brother of the woman who saved our lives, and we are the ones to put him down. First off, I have to say that the characters in Dying Light are fantastic. They aren't all given a ton of time in the spotlight, but from the time they do get, they are all developed very well. While we befriend Rahim, he's shown to be a young, hot-headed kid who wants to do the right thing, but at the same time wants to prove himself. He wishes he was given more responsibility, so he can help. He claims he'd rather die doing something like blowing up a hive of infected if it means saving so many other lives. We only have a few limited interactions with him, but in that small time, so much is portrayed. I praised Assassin's Creed Origins for this same exact thing, and I absolutely needed to bring it up here as well. I mentioned Rais already, but he is another perfect example, because in very brief interactions, he can completely steal the show. I also need to mention how they handled our character, Kyle Crane. The entire game is shown through his eyes, literally. We never actually get to see ourselves. That means we can't see his facial expressions or body posture. We can only understand his thoughts and emotions through his voice. That is a pretty difficult task. In a situation like the one with Rahim, Crane processes what just happened, going from rage and punching a wall repeatedly to sadness as what just happened settled in. Then, seconds later, he needs to tell Brecken, the leader of the tower, what just happened. It's amazing how everything Crane is going through, all of his emotion, is expressed almost entirely through his voice. You can hear him almost growling in rage at first, but his voice becomes so somber so quickly. I have to commend the voice acting here, as it's our only real way to connect and understand with Kyle. It also helps that the cutscenes all of this takes place in are so seamless. By that, I mean there are no cuts. There are no loading screens or stops in the game at all. You seamlessly transition from game to cutscene and back to game again. When we are in a tough situation like the one with Rahim, it helps that the game flows so smoothly. Too many loading screens could hurt the tone of the scene, but Dying Light really doesn't have loading screens, unless it's a map transition. You can run around the entire city of Harran with multiple cutscenes and not once encounter a loading screen. Techland did an amazing job here. But there isn't ever a dull moment, right? Because mere moments after getting back to the tower, Rais takes his revenge and attacks. He kidnaps Dr. Zara, who was doing research on the virus. We can barely process our loss when we need to run after Rais back to his compound. This is where, again, the political aspect of the game comes back. We call the GRE for help, but find the local Ministry of Defense is taking command of the situation. They plan on bombing Harran in an effort to completely eradicate the virus. The Ministry doesn't care about the survivors in the city, but only their political gains. And then, to make matters worse, Rais captures us too, making us fight in his zombie arena. Here, he publicizes the file, revealing the GRE intended to weaponize the virus and sell it to the highest bidder. Even more political agendas. Unfortunately, the doctor is killed, but Jade actually took his research before Rais attacked, so we must follow her to Sector Zero, the heart of the city and the epidemic. Sector Zero is far more compact than the slums of Harran that we start out in, but that also means it's far more dangerous. Our main focus here is to get the research from Jade to another doctor named Camden. Rais now kidnaps Jade and we track them down. At some point, she was infected, and when we find her, we are both on the brink of turning. For a second time, she saves our life, and for it, we have to put her down as well. Jade was the one who saved us originally. We owe our life to her, and yet we are put in another situation where we have to put down an infected friend. Rais escaped, but only with half the research. Even though we only have the other half, we still need to get it to Camden before something else happens. And then, we need to confront Rais atop his own skyscraper, before getting away with the rest of the research. After scaling the tower, we get a series of quick-time events. Those are always fun, right? Either way, we kill Rais, and with the other half of the research, we ensure our leverage over the GRE and Ministry, and prevent the destruction of the city. And that is our adventure through Dying Light. As I've mentioned, the story is quite unique for a zombie game. While everyone else is concerned with simply surviving, we deal with multiple political organizations with aims far larger than anything going on in Harran. But as time goes on, we can see Crane develop from a man just doing his job to somebody who actually cares and wants to help the people in the city. Crane's character development is fantastic, but most of the main characters are all very well developed. We are always given the information we need, and everyone acts as you'd expect them to. The story is just plain good. Well, the main game at least. We do have a major DLC called The Following, and it's a bit weird. The Following starts off with a wounded man spouting some sort of nonsense about people who are apparently immune to the virus. Camden's research isn't going fast enough, and the tower is too low on antizin, so any leads on supplies is something we need to take. Following a map leads us to the outskirts of the city, in the rural countryside. The fields are littered with infected, but there are survivors here. But they don't trust outsiders. Well, kind of. They let me just jump the fence and walk around their homes, but can't talk to me because... reasons? Oh well, looks like we need to gain their trust in order to find out anything. Ezgi, the daughter of the town's leader, tells us to fix the water supply. Doing so gives us an in with these survivors, and we can start making some progress. Always keep in mind the situation back home is dire. It is urgent we get anything we can back to the tower ASAP. Occasionally, we call back to Lena, a doctor at the tower, and update her on our situation. But for a situation of such dire circumstances, such as the entire tower possibly being lost, we sure do take our sweet-ass time. For real, we need to gain people's trust, but that means running all over the countryside just doing random shit for people. The game pushes such urgency when it comes to the situation of the tower, but we have to just grind trust slowly but surely. The trust system would be good as a sidebar, so you can get all sorts of unlockables, but the main quest should really be the focus on how to move forward. That's how it worked in the main game. The main story quest determined your progress, not some random reputation bar. It just ends up slowing down the pace of the DLC and goes against the urgent nature of us being there to begin with. So, right away, things are a bit rocky, but we must trek onward. The more trust we gain with the locals, the more attention we get of a local cult known as the Children of the Sun. This cult supposedly has a way to walk amongst the undead and not to get infected. The cult eventually says they will provide us with a more permanent cure for the virus if we help them further. Remnants of Rise's thugs cause the cult some issues and intend to steal the cure for themselves. When we make our way to their home base to finish off the thugs and claim our cure for helping the children, we come across a massacre. Deep within the compound is the Mother, the leader of the cult that the locals worship. She speaks to us telepathically? She's the last one standing and oh shit. She is a volatile. A sentient volatile. Turns out the cult are using a mist that wards off symptoms just like antizin, but the Mother's plan for a cure is actually nuking the city of Haran. We have a choice. Nuke the city and therefore invalidating the entirety of everything we worked for in the main game, or not. Good talk. Obviously, I'm not going to nuke the fucking city after going through hell to stop the government from nuking the fucking city. What the fuck? Well, that offends the gross volatile mother lady, and she forces us to drink the fake cure. Then we fight, but not with weapons. Instead, we go feral and fist fight her. Somehow we tear her head off, because I guess we can do that now. But we aren't out of the woods yet. Something's going on. With vials in hand, we make our way through some sewers and back outside. Except, not in Haran. Somehow we got back out into the normal world. We can see some kids playing on a playground until they see us. That's when we realize it's almost nighttime, and we have turned into a volatile too. And that's how it ends, with the virus now spreading outside Haran. It definitely sets up a sequel nicely, but it was a bit of a mess getting there. As I said, we have to do so much random shit to help out the cult and gain their trust, which royally fucks the pacing of the DLC. You'd expect Crane to want to rush and maybe even be impatient with the cult or the locals. Lives are on the line, right? Nope, we're taking our time here. Fuck the tower, I guess. I can understand when we first arrive, we would be a bit cautious in an unfamiliar area with unfamiliar people that we still need to gain the trust of. But it ends up getting to a point where we are helping them out constantly for everything. There's a quest where we need to go to a house on a cliff and pick up some medicine, because the guy who used to bring it has gone missing. When we get there, it seems the floor on his house is caved in and there's a small volatile hive. The man turned into a volatile and begs for mercy. Pretty fucked up situation. But why am I the one here again? I'm on a timetable here, why am I doing a fetch quest? Or when Ezgi runs off with her friends, and I'm the one sent after them. Or maybe even the quest where I am sent to clear out a farm of bandits because... bandits. The issue doesn't come from the quests themselves, but rather the requirement to do the quests. These are side quests. The game itself classifies them as such, but requires us to do all these random quests to purely gain reputation to do the main story quests. The story itself isn't that bad. Honestly, there are a bunch of small notes and messages here and there that hint at the origin of the virus, which is interesting. Once we start working directly with the Children of the Sun, things really come together and become a more coherent story. But that means half the DLC is just running errands for people, which is a real shame. On top of that, everything feels so contained. By that, I mean what happens in the countryside is completely irrelevant to what happens in Harran. Yes, we have some leftover thugs from Rise, and we occasionally talk to Lena, but we never see Lena outside of the cinematic, and thugs are just thugs, nothing special. Everything we did with Rise, the GRE, the Ministry, and saving Harran has nothing to do with the countryside. Perhaps if it wasn't so disconnected from the main story, it would feel a bit more important. As it stands, it seems like, story-wise, the DLC is just a way to set up a sequel. Maybe if instead of the entire countryside, we still had some parts of the map in the city, so I could potentially see some changes over time? Like we could see the continued decay or destruction of the city, and further desperation of the tower. It might make the mission to get help that much more apparent. Really, I just feel it could have been implemented way better.